too. So I went and enjoyed it very, very much. She's a delightful person and has a very interesting story to tell. She was so terrific to fill in at the last moment during the conference last year for Andy Lakey when he was unable to come. And everyone was just thrilled with her talk. So I'm so happy that she agreed to come today to speak to us. Please give a warm welcome for Debbie Bland.
I talk in this one isn't. That one's on too. Okay, I may move around, we'll see what we do. I have to say that knowing that I had already spoken to some of you before, I decided I was going to talk on something totally different and just sideline my near-death experience. And then Diane said, oh, no, we want to hear all about your near-death experience. So I didn't want to bore you to death, so what I think I'm going to do, it's going to be a little bit like a fireside chat. This is not as organized as the talk I gave before, but I thought I would incorporate some other experiences that I've had so that, it might enrich it a little bit for you. And I will start off, actually, when I was 16. I had a kidney malfunction. I only have one kidney, and the kidney I have is not formed correctly, and so I had to have what's called a pyeloplasty, or surgery on the kidney. And they said that and I was my full size by the time I was 13, so they said when this long, lanky thing was lying in the hospital bed, they said, well, she was supposed to be emaciated, like Arnold in the little TV sitcom, to have had all of this kidney problem, but I guess my body didn't know that. But the reason I would tell about that is because in the kidney surgery, after the kidney surgery, I had to have a drainage tube in my side, and as all things will happen, it ended up, things went along fine until it actually got plugged up, and for about 13 hours it was totally stopped up, and they didn't know what was wrong, so I kept drinking more water. Well, I had intense pain, as anybody who's associated with medical situations knows. That would be quite painful to have a totally blocked kidney. But what I discovered, and the reason I would tell you about it, is that I was able to, through my own interior processes, recite the 23rd Psalm and walk into the 23rd Psalm and out of the pain. It was a way of sort of walking beyond the body in my own discovered way, I guess. And I could, occasionally it would come back and I would have to recenter and re-go out into the 23rd Psalm. And that's what carried me through that particular time. I think that we very often don't realize how important some of these little memory things that we do when we're growing up and all along, the things that we memorize, are the only things that we have with us when we actually have gone into the consciousness and out of the body consciousness, but just into our spirit consciousness. And so you might think about it, those who've had near-death experiences or those who haven't, to consider a text that is very comforting to you and be sure that you have it memorized and very accessible to you because it's a wonderful tool when you need it. So that's the first little fireside talk part that I thought that I would share with you. And then I recovered from that and managed very well until I was about 27 and a half. And people who like astrology particularly are interested in the fact that that's the Saturn return, and that's when many people have this sort of change of life, or you start realizing what your focus is and what your purpose, and things happen at that particular time that bring about a certain level of maturity. Well, I, at this time, had a surgery. It was an elective surgery and a very simple surgery. Echoing. I wonder if I can just talk over this. Let's try it. I feel like, yeah, that'll work. I feel like I'm tied down when I've got that little anchor there. So I went in for this elective surgery, supposed to be very simple, in one day, out the next. That was before everything was outpatient. Isn't that the truth? Nobody is in one day and out the next. They just never get to stay. But this surgery, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And in fact, it was because of my kidney situation that they told me I should never bear children. And so that was a real concern, and so I had decided to have a sterilization process. Well, everything went wrong, and for about 9 days after that little procedure, I kept getting worse and worse, and things weren't going well, and my blood pressure was down and so forth, and they kept saying, oh, you're going to get better, you'll go home tomorrow, and I kept staying in the hospital one more day. Finally, on the 10th day, the doctor did some checkup on me, and to see that everything was right. He said, everything's fine, you just plan to go home tomorrow. Well, in the meantime, when he had done the palpitation or checkup, that had really broken loose. I was having a lot of internal bleeding. And so in the middle of the night, I had a emergency surgery because all my vital signs had gone flat, and it was, my husband was just being initiated into Masonic, was Shriners, wasn't it? Yeah, 32nd degree, and they called him out of that, and called my various family members in. And I don't usually tell this, but this is an informal chat, so I'll be a little more open. You have 7 pints of blood supposedly in yourself, and there were at least 5 pints of blood in my abdominal cavity, so there wasn't, much left, and that's what had created the situation, besides infection and various things. So everything, they were able to recover my vital signs, but that's not when I had the near-death experience. The near-death experience actually occurred 3 days later. My body had been so debilitated by all of this and they were particularly concerned that the kidney would stop, and instead everything else was stopping. A lung was collapsing and so forth and so on. But so I was hanging between life and death for about 3 days. And during this time, sort of slip in and out of my body very easily. It's as if the body really couldn't hold the spirit, and so it was very easy to slip in and out. It was not like a coma, and I stayed away most of the time, but it was not like a coma because if a person called my name, then I could return with effort and respond. And then it was so uncomfortable that, of course, I would leave very quickly again. And this went on for about 3 days. During that time, I was extremely sensitive, psychically sensitive. And when I tell my story, I think there are a lot of therefores, and I think that that's important for people, you know, to have some therefores to it. When you visit people who are sick or who are in the hospital and have had some major problems, and their bodies are very weak, and they're also very, very psychically sensitive at that time. So don't do like one of my friends did. Come in and look at you and have this horrified expression on your face like, oh my God. And that does not help the person you're going to be. And in fact, even if you don't show it outwardly, if you have those emotions, they still are just like sandpaper on a sensitive person. And if you can't be very calm and very connected in the real, anchored in deep in spirit where life and death doesn't matter, as you said, if you can't be anchored in that place, I think you're better off not to visit somebody in the hospital until they're starting to look better and you can feel a little more comfortable with them. It's very important if you go into a hospital for any reason to visit someone who's really sick, to have a sense of peace about yourself and to have to carry that peace with you, because then you can give them something. Otherwise, you're creating a lot of problems. And in fact, I had to ask the doctor to put a no visiting sign on my door because I couldn't take visitors. And it hurt some people's feelings from the family because they thought they should come visit me all the time. And then it was during this time as well, and I didn't tell this in my talk that I gave last year this time, and I think it was a year before that I met Diane, is that my mother, who, this was in North Carolina, and my mother, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, in case you're trying to place the accent. And my mother was still teaching in Richmond, Virginia, and she drove down to be with me during this time because she arrived after that crucial surgery in which at least they had gotten my life signs back and stopped the internal bleeding. And she came in, and of course, as I said, I was always sort of in and out and very sensitive. And so when I saw her come in, I could see very clearly her concern and her love and just a mother's care. And my mother's a delightful person. But I had gotten married 7 years earlier and much against her wishes. And she thought I had gotten married too young. And when I tell the story, I do go on and tell you my age so that you won't be trying to figure out now how many years. So I am now 64, and So I had gotten married when I was 20, and she thought that was entirely too young. I hadn't finished college yet, and you know, so she was even, although we went on and had a wedding and so forth, she was always grumbling around to her friends at the wedding, and it made me very resentful, and so I sort of emotionally shut her out. I would see her when I had to, but I would keep this cool border or fence around myself. And when I saw her, and really saw her vulnerability, and saw more clearly, one sees more clearly from that perspective, I fully and totally released and forgave her. And when I did that, it was as if when you have a singer who can sing a particular note, you know, that high piercing note that we don't want to hear, but that it can break a glass, and the glass just shatters totally. It was as if I had been encased in a glass or clear bubble, and that you couldn't tell it was there until the note of forgiveness was sounded, and then in its crumbling away, I could be aware that it had been there and that it had been blocking me. I really don't know what the quality of my near-death experience would have been had I not forgiven and had that opening. So, and in fact, when that shattered, it put me in touch with an even higher level, and I experienced what you might call, I don't know, this rejoicing, angelic rejoicing, music of the spheres, I don't know what you would call it, but just this absolutely joyful, rejoicing universe that's sounding all around us all the time, because that's what it really is. That's the real reality. And so from that perspective, I would say pay attention to the resentments that you carry. It doesn't have to be overt anger, but just the quiet resentments can block you in a major way. And they don't do you any good, and in fact block you from the joy that is ever present. And it's just that I was more sensitive and could tell it more actually, but it affects us all the time. So that, now we finally get to my near-death experience. So as we, then on the third day, I had, since I had been always out of the body more than in the body, I didn't particularly have a tunnel experience, but I found myself in the presence of what I would call the Council of Light. And this, it's a council because it was more than one consciousness. If it was one, it was such a multiplicity of one that you would have to call it multiple. I know in the Bible, one of the names for God is Elohim, and that is a plural word, that there is a plurality. It's a consciousness maybe we can't understand, and having studied theosophy, I understand that there are all kinds of levels of this consciousness that reverberates in reflections of reflections, and that finally to a reflection that we can identify with, but there's much beyond what we can see or experience. So it's a council, and light, because there was just this atmosphere of total light. That's how I would define it. That's how I would experience it, as total lightness. And in fact, for me, there were no shapes or no form. It was just an atmosphere of light. And it was the little focal points of consciousness that made me aware of the multiple beings. And they communicated through what I would say holographic thought forms, not verbally. Now, when I talk about it, I have to talk as if they were just chatting with me. But it was like whole thought transference, not reading, not like mind reading, but more like total understanding with all the innuendos in it, that there's a total understanding. And I call these thought forms or thought transference like holographic thought bubbles, because everything was present related to one thing in a wholeness. And where I really saw that, of course, it was in all the communication, but then this Council of Light led me through the life review. And in the life review, this is the way I reviewed my life, not as you would picture a movie going backwards or forwards or little movies of things, but more of a holographic looking at things. Depending on where you focused, then it brought everything that related to that focus in to be present all at once. And the things that I reviewed were things like qualities of being, and we'll take an example of truthfulness, say, or kindness, or whatever. And everything that I had done in this entire life that related to that particular theme, that particular quality of being, was present. Even tiny little things and big things, they were all a part of that whole scheme of things. So that our lives are made up of these threads of themes that all relate. They're all related and connected, and even small bits of it are part of this whole theme. So that the small things you do and the big things you do, they're all very connected and they're one whole. I think that's useful to know, because sometimes we forget the little things and we think it's just the big things that matter, but it's every little thing along the way builds this whole theme or thought form. And the two things that I tended to review were qualities of being, or qualities that I built into myself, and relationships. And those are the two things, I think, that are just really key. They are the treasures that we can build up and store in heaven, where moth and rust don't corrupt. They're the things we carry with us. And so in looking at this review, and I have to tell you that I was very traditional Southern Protestant, and all of this was totally out of the realm of my thought or experience. And it was before near-death experiences became popular, because this was in 1968, and I had not even heard of a near-death experience. So these qualities when they reviewed my life, they said, and I'll say that it was conversational, they said that I had accomplished all that I needed to accomplish in this lifetime. Now, I had really not done that much in my lifetime. I might have taken a few stands for the good for one thing or another, but I had not done that much, and I don't think I'm fully enlightened. But it shows that you do not know. I think every life has a purpose, and that purpose can be brief, it can be long. Whatever it is, you don't know what that purpose is, what the purpose of a life is, but each one of us come with a particular purpose that we need to unfold and to do, and we do that by growing out of whatever is our own nature and serving that well. And the little voice inside of us tells us what that purpose is. But so it's interesting that they said I had accomplished all that I needed to in this life, but that I had an opportunity. If I wanted to go back, I could choose. I could either leave now or I could come back. And I did have an opportunity to serve when I came back. Well, that was a challenge, and at that level, I think that we are involved in choosing our lives at that level, even when we are born. But it's not the level we are now, because where we are now, we say, I would never choose this. But at that level, there's a totally different perspective. And the perspective is unfoldment and growth and service. And sometimes the most difficult situations produce the greatest amount of growth. And so that would be the case. So I decided, well, I squared the proverbial shoulders and said that I will come back. And they were very concerned about it because they recognized that I had had a fairly easy life up to that point. And I had not, as you know, that when you have difficulties is when you develop your strengths, and I had not developed those strengths. So I did not have good coping skills, and they said when you go back, it's going to be very difficult. But you know, sometimes fools will rush in where angels will fear to tread, and I did come back. I chose to come back, and they gave me a gift to help me in my return, and that was a key word, and I think it's a very theosophical word because one of the main aspects of theosophy is altruism. And the word that they gave me was very simple. It was others. And they said that would be the key to my life if I came back, and that also that word would carry with it some of the memory of this experience. And so I did return to my body with this word reverberating in my in this sort of dark tunnel experience coming back. And then I found myself in my body. And this time I couldn't get out anymore. I was stuck in the body. And as I lay there, I thought, I can't believe I did this. And when one is at that level, one isn't thinking of the physical body at all. And as I lay there, I kept even trying to think what on earth it was that I was going to do and how I was going to do it. I couldn't even imagine myself getting up out of the bed and walking, much less because I was so debilitated by this point that that, I just was barely alive by a thread. And I stayed in the hospital even 2 or 3 more weeks after this, just trying to get all the body parts going together again. So, but gradually, I'm here, and I've been here a long time, and I have gradually improved in health as the time has gone on. But when I first was, I think it was the first day I got back from the hospital, my father, I told my family about my experience, and my father had been a closet theosophist, and I had not known it, and he had some theosophical books that talk about the astral or emotional plane and the mental plane, other planes of existence, a grander scope of what life is about and what life means. And so I started reading those books, and it just was like it, in fact, the first book I read, it was like it turned on a light bulb for me. And I was in an area that did not have any ready access to the Theosophical Society. But as I talked with my family, my mother and my brother, my mother, my father, and my husband, David, who's sitting here, all joined the society at the same time and studied together. And it gave me a real context for understanding my near-death experience and how to deal with it. I was catapulted into just insatiable study and meditation. I didn't know what meditation was, but for me it was connecting again with that deep inner atmosphere of joy and love and peace that pervades the other world, as those of you who have experienced it know. So, and theosophy, some of the things that were helpful to me, there's a broad range of understanding, but one is this unity principle that all of life is so interconnected, and that there is this holistic approach to everything that we do, and that we are all a part of this same one, and that life is changing, and that all is changing, and that all of the whole manifested universe is cyclical and changing and continuous, and that we are all on a pilgrimage. And that our existence in this world is a pilgrimage, and we come again and again as we explore this pilgrimage and grow and learn and serve others. So as I worked with my meditation and study and so forth, gradually I was able to integrate. I know that it's difficult to integrate everything all at once. And in fact, it's sort of like a train that starts, when all the cars are close together and you pull and jerk, and it's like each car jerks as you try to get all the pieces going in the same direction again. I had a lot of realizations, and there was a great peace and a joy on the one hand, but I was still who I was on the other, and I was still stuck with the same personality. I didn't come back, as a totally different person, and it's like it didn't connect. And so, little piece by little piece, I started growing and learning and dealing with that. And I think one of the things that happens in the near-death experience is that there is a shock to the whole psychic system. For a moment, there's a stillness that lets all of our patterns and all of our hang-ups and all of our attachments and so forth, for a moment, they're just a little bit shaken and loosened. And so that they become much more visible and accessible and plastic to us to work with it. and especially right after the near-death experience, it's more plastic, and it's good to take advantage of it when it's very plastic like that, because we can work on ourselves much more from that particular point. So I would say that as those of us who've experienced near death, or those who have been interested in it, that the thing to bring from it is really the fact that whatever understanding we have and whatever growth we have had and connection with the other, however you would call it, that it is our opportunity and our privilege to bring that connection to other people and to ground it in service in some way to this earth and this plane, and we can be sort of transformers, as one might say, to change our world for the better. So I believe that's all that I have to share with you, but I'm open to questions and discussion. Yes, Diane.
How often did you use your keyword, and how did that play out in your life?
Oh, well,
Repeat the question, please.
oh, okay, to repeat the question, how did I use my keyword and how did it play out in my life? It's certainly a touchstone for me, and was a touchstone then, and brought a lot of the memory of that experience back with me. But I would say that it's just an underlying principle. In fact, my husband of 44 years now says that he's had 2 different wives without getting married twice, because I changed so radically. I did not have the coping skills before, and I have developed immense coping skills. But everything, there's just a different orientation. It's like before I tended to be, I would say I was a little bit lazy and a little bit self-focused. And it just totally changed my focus, so that whatever I do and whatever I think is in the direction of the whole. And even when I'm very busy, if somebody particularly needs my attention, that gets the attention first, sometimes to my detriment, because then I still have my work to do, and I have quite a responsible position that takes everything I've got. But I didn't intend to get to the position of being president of the society, and many years ago I would have said anybody was crazy to think I would be. But over time it just happened because I was available for service in many ways. Yes?
What's the difference in the way you view life today as opposed to before your experience?
The difference in the way I view life now as opposed to how I did before. I view life, before I viewed it like most people do, as a concrete thing, and things are happening in sequence and so forth. I view life very much, it's a very plastic thing. It is not what we think it is. And what we do within our consciousness impacts in a great measure what ends up coming to us from the outer world. And in fact, I think part of life is, that it is things presented to us to grow through. And it's how we deal with things that makes the difference, not what happens to us. And even the most tragic, difficult things, which we would never go for, and I don't recommend anybody trying a near-death experience, actually. If you don't have to do it. But whatever happens is that you can take it and if you process it in your spiritual self, that it can become a blessing. Yeah. Okay.
Can you speak to your relationship with your mother before and after?
Speak to my relationship to my mother
How
before.
was it, and then how did it change?
Yeah. My mother is really a very dear, sweet person and didn't deserve my ire, but I had very much distanced myself from her, and it was probably necessary in a way, as all people know when they grow up. They have to cut those apron strings totally. And she's such a nice person that probably I would have never cut the apron strings fully if I hadn't have had that separation. But afterwards, we were just very good, mature friends meeting on an equal level. And now she is almost 93, and she looks to me very much for, I'm her mother now. It happens. Yes.
Thank you so much for talking about resentment and how that destroys us from the inside out and just eats up relationships. I was so surprised to hear that you had such strong resentments against your mother, and of course I understand why now, knowing the background, because for years that I've seen you, I always saw you as, that's what attracted me to you, is your relationship with your mother. And I said, oh, there's that mother and daughter couple again. And it was always so very heartwarming for me to see how respectful and nurturing and loving and kind you always were to your mother in my presence. And so I want to thank you for that, because you're just a wonderful example of what a daughter, should look like.
Oh, thank you. It's a real gift, and I'm honored to have the mother that I have. She's a wonderful gift. She's a delightful person. If this is an aside, I have to brag on my mother. At 92 and a half, she still tutors remedial students in reading. Until a few years ago, she was delivering Meals on Wheels to the elderly. She teaches Sunday school class, and she visits shut-ins, and she was particularly visiting one shut-in who then had to go into a nursing home and wasn't going to be accessible to her anymore. And I said, oh, Mother, what are you going to do now that you're going to have a free afternoon every week? And she said, oh, well, I'll find somebody else. Now, that's really a beautiful person, isn't it? She used to be an English teacher, but she always is doing that kind of thing. Yes?
Do you still attend church on a regular basis, or I don't know if you did prior to this, or as you go to different church now? Or?
Well, I have gone through a lot with church. My husband, if I can expose you, was a Southern Baptist minister at one time. And we have always been active in churches up until just since I have been the president of the Theosophical Society for the last 3 years. I work weekends, mornings, evenings, all the time, and I have not had the time to pursue it. When we, just a few years ago, when we lived in Alabama, we were very involved with an Episcopal church. And I particularly loved it, and I miss it, and if I ever have any spare time, I will go back to that. Because the Episcopal church gave us elbow room, mental elbow room, whereas some of the other churches did not. And I really enjoyed the liturgy. I think as far as religion is concerned, and I think when you go through a growing process, it's never the religion of your childhood anymore, and you have to grow a way through that. And so, you know, you might go in and out of love with religion along the way. But I think that religion is very valuable. I didn't repeat that question, I don't think, but asking about this relationship to religion. What I think that all of us, when we are in our very formative years, connect with what our cultural religion is, and it goes deep into our psyche. And we might explore and be fascinated with other religions, but the religion that was our childhood religion can be a gift to us if we can use it. We have to understand it in broader terms, and you know, in terms not as a child would understand, and not as some rigid fundamental approach might understand, but there's I think there's a depth. In fact, that's one of the beauties of Theosophy, is it has a very ecumenical look at things. It looks for truth wherever it is, and appreciates and honors the wisdom in each one of the religions. And I think we have to find that wisdom in our own tradition, and that it will speak to us in a way that no other can. Yes.
You spoke about purpose, and I wonder if you could say some more about finding one's purpose, or how you understood and how you found your purpose.
How you can find your purpose. You know, I think life is very interesting. As I said, I think it's very plastic and fluid, and that at a very deep inner level, we have something to do with where we are right now. And I think one unfolds one's purpose by one little thread at a time, seeing where one is, what one's abilities are, and what one can do right now, right in this situation. I don't think one's purpose is off somewhere else. It might ultimately be, but if it's off somewhere else, little threads, little windows of opening and understanding come along. And the more you are sensitive to doing the best with what you can do, right in this little moment, in this circumstance, I think that life circumstances are a blessing, not a curse, because they can define for us what it is, where we need to go if we'll just look through those little windows. I don't know if any of you are familiar with therapeutic touch, but this is an image for me that I use. With therapeutic touch, one which Dora Kuntz and Dee Krieger taught as a healing modality, they learn to be sensitive with their hands. And if you put your hands together and just feel there's an energy pulse between your hands, you don't have to touch. And it's that energy pulse that then you can use with healing, and use also being sensitive to the field of another person as to what they need. And I think that this same sensitivity on the inner world, it's like using therapeutic touch to your circumstances and seeing where is the window and where is the opportunity. And if you live by it or abide by it, but then it opens out a little more and you might find another. But it's just right where you are in one little thread at a time. And actually, I don't think you see where it was going until about 10 years later. You look back and you say, oh, I understand now. You know, so it is, part of the game of being in this life is being, it's like blind man's bluff, you know, we've got to do it with blindfolds on, and then we'll finally see what it was we were supposed to be doing after we've done it. That's the way I relate to it. What is our time frame? I don't know.
We end at 5.
Oh, so we've got plenty of time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm a little curious about one thing. This doesn't really relate to what you were saying, but I believe Theosophy supports the concept of more than one lifetime.
Does Theosophy support more than one lifetime? Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Now, I understand it was a Madame Blavatsky or something.
Madame Blavatsky.
Blavatsky. Okay, I understand that she really pushed this idea, which is on the earth plane, but then once she went across, I understand through communication, she denounced the whole thing and said it was all wrong. Do you know anything about that?
What I do know is that Madame Blavatsky was a Russian noblewoman, very psychic, and she studied with great religious masters and teachers, actually all over the world, and this was in the mid-1800s, and she traveled by stagecoach across to the West, and you know, and women weren't supposed to be off by themselves doing these things. She was quite a remarkable woman. And she brought the traditions, some of the Eastern traditions, ideas to the West, and certainly reincarnation was one of those incorporated with it. Now, because she was such an interesting woman and a controversial woman, and she had a temper, she was no saint. People resented her highly, some people did, particularly the standard Christians, because she was shooting them in the foot as far as they were trying to missionize all the colonies at this time, and she was saying that each religion has its own value, and so the missionaries didn't care for her. So then after she died, still there was a lot of controversy around her, and in fact, a lot of people, I think, have taken because she really is the one who started all of the New Age thinking. I mean, that was the foundation of it. That a lot of people tried to debunk her one way or another, but there is absolutely no proof or no. In fact, I hadn't even heard that before, so it must be some obscure person, but I'm sure that wherever people could criticize her, there would be critics, because she was the kind of person, she was so electric, she would have brought that to her. Yeah, interesting question, yes.
And perhaps a follow-up question. Did you yourself come to believe in reincarnation from your study of Theosophy, or was it there something in the near-death experience itself?
That's a good question. Did I come to think of reincarnation from my near-death experience or my study of Theosophy? No, it was from my near-death experience, and that was one of the things that attracted me to Theosophy, because it rang so true. When I would read some of these things, it was like it just rang that inner clarity. I didn't have any specific memories of particular past lives, but when I was reviewing this life, there was a sense that this life had brought many things from a distant past, and that whatever I didn't accomplish or finish in this lifetime could be relegated to future lifetimes. So that there was a broad sense of continuity in that level of consciousness. It certainly didn't, wasn't narrowly on this life. And so that reading Theosophy and understanding that broader perspective, it's like, yeah. Yes.
Your natal Saturn return at 28.
Yes.
What was the next one at 56 or 58?
Yeah, I was wondering what was gonna happen then. It was relatively calm, as I know, although I had plenty of difficulties, but I didn't have any health difficulties at that point. It's just, you know, one thing after another, but no, and I had looked for that. I was expecting, in fact, I used to think I'm not gonna live past 56, because when it hits me again, I sure can't take it, but nothing, no, yeah, okay.
Back to reincarnation, do you consider the possibility, or do you think it's at all part of, let's say, universal law that your future lives you refer to could manifest in other physical dimensions, not necessarily Earth?
Okay, he's asking if future lives might manifest in other dimensions. I think that's highly possible. I mean, in the whole theosophical scheme of things, the grand evolution of things, life waves go through various cycles, and sometimes the life forms themselves are in more subtle realms. We just happen to be in the most physical existence at this point, but I think it's very possible that, in fact, probable that at some point in time, evolutionary growth processes will be in other dimensions. So that's a good question. Yes.
If we go back to the king, the others, doing service, and as you say, at some point it may even cause a detriment to you. I have found that there are people out there who need so much that it becomes a detriment to them, and we keep following with them, but I don't feel like I'm the one that should make that decision.
Okay, that's a very good question too, and considering serving others, sometimes it can be a detriment to them, and if they're so needy, and sometimes it can be a detriment to ourselves. Yes, there's a lot of wisdom to be gained. First of all, think about the fact that somebody who really wants help will want to change. And there are a lot of people who say they want help, but they actually want to keep replaying this same thing over and over again. They want to play this game, but they just want to draw somebody else into their circle. It's called codependency in some ways. That, in fact, you're helping them more by not helping them. So one has to have some wisdom in that. And then, although I know what I'm supposed to do, I don't always do it. And that's what I meant. And sometimes I have to call myself up short and say, you know, numero uno first. Because you can't help anybody if you aren't whole yourself. And if you're not functional yourself. I mean, it doesn't do anybody any good to lie down and, you know, let them walk all over you until you're a doormat and gasping for breath. You're not helping anybody. So there's always a balance. It's okay, anybody that needs to leave, just go ahead. Yes.
Can you explain a little bit more about your experience with that plastic and fluid side that it came as a gift in making choices and seeing different, and how you were able to change it?
Can I say anything else about this, the fact that there's such a plasticity to life in understanding life? it's a hard concept for me to explain, so it's hard for me to try to think of ways to tell it, but I have seen in my own life again and again, and I'll bet you many of you have too, if one of the things, if you're on the path of spiritual work, usually that means you've got a sign on your forehead that says, "Hit me." Because when you start working on these things, it's like the universe responds and says, "Oh, at last there's somebody who's awake, who's trying, and so we'll get a, we'll see what we can do with this one." But if you have a particular problem and finally figure out how to conquer it in your life so that it no longer matters whether it's still there or not, 90% of the time something's going to happen and the problem is going to, go out the window anyway, and it's not even there anymore. Because it was so related to your own need to grow through it. And it's like all of what happens in life is more plastic than you realize, and it more relates to your own psyche and what your emotional magnetism brings to it, and draws to yourself. Just like somebody who has an abusive or alcoholic husband or something like that. They have one, they get rid of him, and they take on the same thing again, It's until they heal that within themselves, they're still drawing the same thing. And then all of a sudden they get the picture and they can move beyond that. It's so plastic, it's just amazing that it's not as concrete as we think it is. That's what I was trying to say. That makes sense. Yes.
When we leave this body, is it possible that we go to another planet other than maybe just another dimension of this planet or life?
When we leave this body, is it possible we go to another planet or another dimension or whatever? I think so. I mean, it's possible. I don't, I'm open to the idea. Now, I don't know specifically, and I can't say that next time we will be on Mars or Venus or in the next solar system over or whatever. But it's possible. I mean, consciousness is so all-pervasive and so full and can exist anywhere, and whatever we're drawn, whatever we need and wherever we need to be, we can be.
May I ask one more question?
Okay.
You don't have to answer this. Astrologically, I was wondering where your sun sign is.
I'm a Taurus.
You are.
Very grounded, yeah. And David says I'm stubborn.
But charming, but charming.
We just persist, we're not stubborn.
Yes.
I'm a professional hypnotist, and it's my experience of regressing people back into former lives, that life continues, and the spirit will be reborn in the same circle of friends and family until lessons are learned that bring the person into higher realms of expression in perhaps another dimension.
Yes, saying that in his regressions, he sees that people are attracted to, as they go back in different lifetimes, that they carry with the same sort of people again and again in different ways. Yes, there are two very strong bonds, love and hate. And so the people that you love very much are often related to in various ways, in different ways, different genders and so forth. But also be aware, if you have somebody you really don't like, that's as strong a bond as the hate, and as the love, and you will always connect with them in some way or other until you work it out. So, that's interesting. We do, those bonds are very strong, and carry beyond, lifetimes. Yeah, let me get this other one since you haven't asked.
Last month, our speaker talked a lot about angels. Did you see any angels when you were on the other side during your experience?
What I saw was not so formed that I would identify. I think there were definitely angelic presences, especially after I had my forgiveness. She's asking, did I see angels? Especially after the forgiveness experience, there was a real sense of angelic presences, but I didn't have a visual sense of angels. Yeah, Maggie.
Yes,
Yes.
may I address how you healed your physical body, how it happened, and this is being asked from a person who has no earth in her chart.
No earth. Well, I healed over in very long time, actually, through meditation, through yoga, through regular aerobic walking. Very gradually just started changing the way I did things. And I think vegetarian diet also was helpful. Very gradually, but being very aware. And I do have to be aware because people who know me think that surely I don't have any limitations. But I do have a limited stamina. And so I have to guard that, and that's one of my weaknesses, is I tend to forget to guard it because I have gotten so healthy that I have to pay a lot of attention to that. But over time, I think, I've used acupuncture and herbs and flower remedies and, you name it. Chinese herbs are just wonderful. They taste like the bottom of the sewer. So I have explored many ways, and I think that you have to use your emotional structure as well as physical structure. They both harmonize with each other in finding health. You can't just ignore one, it takes both. Okay.
I was hoping you would have a few minutes to just tell us a little bit about, for those of us who don't know, about Theosophy and the Theosophical Society.
Okay. Theosophy and the Theosophical Society. The Theosophical Society was founded in 1875, and its three objects are to form a nucleus of a universal brotherhood of humanity, regardless of sex, creed, race, caste, or color. Now, this was that long ago, 125, 130 years ago, when that was not even heard of. I mean, the colonialists were still thinking that they had just barely stopped questioning whether women had souls or not. And certainly Native Americans or people from Africa, were definitely somewhat below the Westerners. So I think this was very groundbreaking thinking. And the second object was to encourage the study of comparative study of religion, philosophy, science, and the arts. And this wasn't just an academic exercise, but to explore truth and to find truth wherever you could find it. And the third object was to explore the unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in humanity, which that's a part of what you're doing right now, is you're exploring these things that aren't explained, and it's certainly some of the greatest things that are not explained are the powers that are within each one of us. And the motto is, there is no religion higher than truth. And I think that that's an excellent motto, because certainly religion, meaning religio, or joined back to the ultimate divine, is what we're all about. But it can't be just something that doesn't ring true, and we can't just have beliefs that aren't willing to be tested with thoughts and exploration in every way. It is a membership organization. We have organizations in 70 different countries. It's international. Its international headquarters are in Chennai, India, and I was there for the tsunami this past December. And we participated in a major fundraising effort to provide water treatment plants for the victims. That was one of the greatest needs, was to have clean drinking water. We have groups around this country. Our national headquarters are in Wheaton, Illinois, just up the road a piece. And we have regular meetings, conferences, seminars. We just had Don Campbell here, who had the Mozart Effect, wrote the Mozart Effect, and other ideas related to music and sound and healing. Our summer conference is the last week in July. We'll have several good speakers then, and we have programs running all year. We'd be delighted to put you on our mailing list. I have business cards if you would like them. I did not want to promote myself or my thing, so I didn't mention it before, but I'd be happy to share that with you. And I would encourage you to check out our website, which has a lot of information.
What is that website?
There's a monthly publication too.
Oh, yes, it's a bi-monthly publication called The Quest Magazine, and the website address is www.theosophical.org. And we have a lot of information on that, and we're always changing it. And if you want to be sure, my husband has some of my business cards in his pocket. You can get one of the business cards from him, and it's got the web address on it.
You also have a wonderful bookstore out there.
Oh, I encourage you to go to our bookstore. We have just renovated it, expanded it. If you haven't been there recently, it's quite a lovely bookstore, and it's very eclectic. It covers all information about religions and various spiritual practices and so forth, as does our library, which is a very wonderful source. And it's on a 40-acre estate in Wheaton, one of the rare green spots. And we encourage you to come and walk the labyrinth and enjoy the grounds as well. So I think that seems to be a good time to end. And thank you. You're a great audience.
Thank you, Betty. It was such a pleasure to have you here. And I know that this will be helpful to all of you in some way or another. Don't hesitate, as she said, to go to their website. They have wonderful programs. And don't forget, next month we have Sharon Heller coming. Please give a call if you want to session with her, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Join us at Ruby's if you can. We will be going to Ruby's. Thanks.